whole lot more about tonight. This is a staff-led virtual public meeting, which we are recording. And although we might at some point have an elected official or an appointed official in attendance, I do want to reiterate that this is a community meeting, and any elected or appointed officials are not going to be voting on this meeting or any part of this project tonight. If they join us, they'll simply be listening to the input and perhaps sharing their thoughts as we discuss the topics tonight. Again, thank you for taking the time to join us. So this meeting is being conducted electronically through dedicated video and audio conferencing, and the public can access the meeting via the website that you used. If you are listening, it's www.fairfaxcounty.gov/parks/planning-development/planning/PROSA. I hope you got that, but I'll be glad to repeat it if we must. The public can also participate by calling in, and you can call 888-270-9936, and then you would enter the access code 411406. So now that we have those formalities completed, we're really going to begin our program. So again, welcome to the Fairfax County Park Authority PROSA meeting and public workshop. Next slide, please. All right, and I should mention that in the chat there is a shortened link, so you wouldn't have to remember all that I told you. So we do have a robust agenda, and our plan is to make this workshop worth your time and ours. You'll hear an introduction that outlines the project tonight. We're going to explore best practices regarding access to parks and figure out what you like to do when you visit parks. We'll be holding a polling session, followed by a workshop in which you tell us what you like to do and see and experience in your park system. And we're going to answer some questions and listen to your comments. And then when we conclude, we're going to tell you what's going to come next. I wanted to also mention that we do have, aside from the speakers who I'll introduce as we go along, we also have a few staff members that I'd like to introduce, and that is Robert Boyd, who is a senior planner, Adam Wynn, who is also a senior planner, and Sam Hudson, who is the park planning manager. We'll meet the others. All right. So next slide, please. So how does all this work? Well, you can put your comments in the chat, and we'll be glad to share them with others and respond if we can. You can raise your hand virtually, and I'll be glad to recognize you. And you can also call in. It's a long tutorial, but I think we have to just go through it. Again, it's the explanation that I gave you for calling in. I'm not going to go through it again. As we get closer, I'll just tell you the number right now, 888-270-9936, and the code to enter is 411406. When that happens, it'll let you into a waiting room. If you wish to speak, press *6, and at that point you would want to move away from your computer because there is a delay and it gets confusing because you'll hear yourself twice through the phone. I think that's enough on that. As we get closer, we'll go ahead and remind you of all of these specifics at that point. Again, the presentation is being recorded, and that's going to allow us to put that on the website in the next couple of days. And again, you can type your questions in the Zoom chat, and staff is monitoring that, and we'll be glad to answer questions as we go. All right. So at this time, having done all of that, I'm going to ask Park Authority Deputy Director Amy Vosper to offer some welcoming remarks.
Thank you, Judy. Good evening, everyone. I just wanted to give everyone a great warm welcome from the Park Authority. We are very excited about this project and very excited about starting to share the project with you all. So we've got a great team working on all aspects. This will be the first kind of introduction to the big, wider world. So we're very happy to have you all on board tonight. I also wanted to make sure that we introduced our new division director, Brendan, tonight. And so he will be saying hello next. Thanks.
In fact, you took the words right out of my mouth.
Oh, sorry.
We did want to introduce Brendan Hannafin. He is the director of the Park Planning and Development Division. He is relatively new to the job, but he is long tenured and well experienced as a park planner. So Brendan, the virtual floor is yours.
Thank you, Judy. Thank you, Amy. Welcome, everybody. We're super excited to get started with the public outreach on this project. PROSA is really going to lay the groundwork for our system, the Park Authority, to improve access to parks and provide an equitable park system for all in our community. It's a plan that will set the long-term direction for the entire system. And there's so many important outcomes here, but for our group, one of the main outcomes is it will inform the Park Authority Capital Improvements Program and future land acquisition decisions. We will be making them through a lens, an equity lens based on this document, and your input for that matter. It also aligns the Park Authority's capital planning priorities with major countywide initiatives, such as the strategic plan, Active Fairfax, and One Fairfax, all very large planning efforts by Fairfax County. So we all, like I said, I'd like to thank you for joining. Our team is excited to have you all aboard. So please give us your input. We would really appreciate that. And with that, I'll pass you all back to Judy.
Thank you very much. And it's nice to have you on board. All right, it is now my pleasure to ask Stephanie Cornejo, the project manager and the long range planning section chief, to explain PROSA and to set the stage for tonight's work. Stephanie.
Good evening, everyone. Delighted to be here. The Park Authority's mission statement builds upon its history of natural and cultural resource stewardship and providing quality recreational facilities and experiences that promote diversity, inclusion, and healthy lifestyles. The park system is the primary mechanism in Fairfax County for the preservation of environmentally sensitive land and resources, areas of historic significance, and the provision of recreational facilities and services. To support the mission, we're developing the Parks, Recreation, Open Space, and Access Strategy, also known as PROSA. Tonight, we'll go over the main project objectives, the project schedule, and the elements of the project. So we're spearheading PROSA because of the Parks and Recreation System Master Plan goals and the Park Authority strategic plans, objectives, and policies. More specifically, the strategic plan outlines an action step to develop and implement an approach to county park planning and capital projects that considers resource protection, service level delivery, equity, recreation, and community needs. It also contains a strategic objective to increase walkable access for county residents to park or facility entrances and trailheads to connect people to nature and recreational experiences. Building on the Parks and Recreation System Master Plan and our strategic plan, and One Fairfax, the PROSA strategy will provide a framework for equitable access to FCPA parks and the park system. PROSA is a strategy to create an equitable park.
Stephanie, we're getting a, you may want to start this slide over. Oh, I think you're frozen at this moment. Speak and see if we can get you.
Oh no.
There you are.
Okay.
You're back. So just start at the beginning of this slide.
Sure. I'm sorry about that. And thanks for letting me know. So we're building off of the Parks and Recreation System Master Plan, our strategic plan, and One Fairfax. The PROSA strategy will provide a framework for equitable access to FCPA parks and the park system. PROSA is a strategy to create an equitable park system where residents can access a park within a 10-minute walk from their home. The strategy will provide a roadmap for improved park access and a balance of recreational experiences to meet the diverse needs of Fairfax County residents. To get there, we'll identify gaps in the 10-minute walk access to parks. We'll take into account complete parks by determining the types of recreation categories and experiences, such as active recreation, contemplative experiences, and social gathering, and we'll define which facility types fall into these experiences. We'll also examine habitat connectivity. And then we'll take all the data and look at it through an equity lens. That is to say, factoring in equity using demographics and socioeconomic data. And we'll dive into each of these elements a bit more in a few moments. Turning to our project schedule, we are anticipating the project to occur over 14 months with completion next summer in summer 2023. There are 6 primary project phases that generally include data gathering, analysis, public engagement, strategy development, and strategy approval. And to date, we've completed phase 1 of the project, and we're straddling phases 2 and 3, working on our analysis and preliminary report development, and also here with for public engagement. Diving into our 4 main objectives, for the 10-minute walk analysis, our goal is to identify which households can and cannot access an FCPA park within a 10-minute walk from their home. In fact, currently, 52% of residents can access an FCPA park entrance within 10 minutes from their home. We'll identify priority areas to improve walk access to FCPA parks and identify opportunities to increase the 10-minute walk through existing and future parkland or trails. PROSA is a strategy to create an equitable park system where residents can access a variety of park experiences. And to do so, we're looking at complete park experiences, which consist of active recreation, contemplative passive recreation, social gathering, and natural cultural recreation. For this component of PROSA, we're going to identify which areas do not have an access to the primary park experience categories within a 10-minute walk or 5-minute drive from their home. We'll also evaluate parks based on a park score to understand the balance of these experiences at park sites. We'll also look at habitat connectivity and identify opportunities to improve habitat health at existing parks and identify whether there are opportunities to expand habitat connectivity through existing parkland or potential future parkland acquisitions. And most importantly, we'll use an equity lens to analyze and prioritize projects. We'll utilize One Fairfax as a foundation using their tools and data, and we'll build upon the county's vulnerability index as a foundation for our analysis and findings. So the PROSA strategy will provide a roadmap for improved park access and a balance of recreational experiences, and we'll use an equity lens to analyze and prioritize projects. Now that we've walked through the main project elements, I'll pass it back to Judy.
Thank you. That was very informative. I appreciate it. At this point, we want to explore best practices as it relates to park access and park experiences. And we've been working very closely with our consultants, Kinley and Horn. Representing them this evening is Nick Kuhn. Nick?
Thank you, Judith. Now, park planning, as we were just talking about, is as much art as it is science. We have a lot of tools to be able to analyze and measure how we provide parks and recreation provisions to communities. Many of you might be familiar in terms of level of service discussions in terms of transportation or transportation planning. Our roadways are usually rated between an A and an F level of service based on how much traffic or use there may be on the roadways. However, we don't have those sort of national standards to work with in terms of parks and recreation. And so this is sort of a good thing, though, because this allows us to really define as a community what we feel is acceptable for parks and recreation. So level of service is not really meant to compare communities against one another, but it's really an expression of how we would like to have parks and recreation within our community. To really start that, on the next slide, we'll dive into a little brief history of park planning over the last 150 plus years in the United States. And what this diagram shows, this was actually created by Dr. Galen Kranz at UC Berkeley. And this is really an analysis of the different eras of park planning within the United States. On the top part of the chart, you'll see the goals of parks that were widely accepted for each of those eras. And the bottom portion, the function of parks. And what you'll see here is at the beginning stages of parks during the pleasure ground era, parks were really about public health and bringing positive experiences to the public in terms of those spaces that were about strolling and escaping some of the urban complexities and challenges. But that eventually evolved, and what you see the trend here is additional goals and different functions are added as each of those areas progress. Now, the most recent era, sustainable parks, were really focused on placemaking and ecological health. They also focused on resource conservation and community building as aspects. Some would say we might have entered a new era, particularly noted with the increased demands on parks and recreation, which started during the pandemic. Now, evolving across that, we follow the impacts associated with that, and we want to hear through this process how that might be changing for Fairfax County. So the next slide highlights a little bit about the challenges of level of service. And again, without national standards, they can be obscure or confusing from community to communities. And we recognize that not all communities are apples to apples, neither are parks. But what we do through the level of service measurements is to make sure that we protect the community's access and the quality and the amount of parkland within the community. And so there's currently across the country, typically about 10 different measures of level of service. And the real point here is that no single measurement is really enough by itself. Now, a lot of communities, however, actually do only take one measurement into consideration. And that's typically acres or acreage level of service. And you can see in the blue box how that's expressed. It's the number of acres per 1,000 population. Now, on the next slide, we'll highlight how that really started. And so roughly 90 years ago, George Butler and the National Recreation Association were the first to really define acreage level of service. And you can see actually the quote here of what that definition consisted of: 10 acres of parkland and open space per 1,000 population, plus an equal area of parkways, large parks, and forests. Now, it's that second part that a lot of communities didn't really follow through on. A lot of communities incorporated just the first portion as a general rule of thumb for parks with 10 acres of parkland per 1,000 population. This really lasted until the mid-90s as sort of a standard within parks. But we're also, another important part here was that the standard should vary according to locations and other factors. We also recognize that this measurement doesn't address equitable distribution of parkland in terms of access, also capacity within parks and the facilities, or the quality of facilities or programming. We also understand that, again, not every community and park was apples to apples. So some parks, in terms of what should be counted, some communities included large lakes or even their landfills as open space. So again, no one measurement really captures all the needs. And so since the 1990s, there's been an increased emphasis on access. And the next slide highlights some of the considerations when we talk about access, particularly equitable access. We may think about first about access in terms of the roadway network or transit or sidewalks or trails. We also think about it in terms of some of the qualitative factors, such as busy streets and whether we would allow a child to cross alone. There are other factors that we highlight or considerations when we talk about access that include the facilities or lack of amenities, whether there's restrooms or parking provided, interested in visiting or participation, or even the hours of operation are considerations for access. User abilities, such as age or disabilities, or heart health or obesity are factors. And then we have perceptions and demographics, factors of perceived or real crime or loitering, lack of lighting, racial or ethnic tensions, language, as well as citizenship can be all factors when we talk about equitable access. And actually on the next slide are some additional elements of consideration. You'll see on the top of the screen, the urban transect. This illustrates conditions from the left side of the screen are rural conditions, the right side that are urban conditions. And addressing access can be different across where you are within that transect. As you saw earlier, the diagram on the bottom is one way, again, to address access Now, traditionally, we've been measuring access in terms of proximity, and that's the circle that you see in the diagram. That was the easiest way to really lay out a map and put circles and fill up the map in terms of having access. But we know that's not always the case in real life. And so with technology, we've been able to actually adapt and better analyze access by using GIS to analyze true walk sheds and bike sheds and drive sheds for parks. And this actually allows us to better understand the physical barriers and other barriers within communities that really establish the true level of access for parks. On the next slide, we wanted to highlight the progression of level of service measurements within Fairfax counties. The top two are highlighted in blue, and those are, again, some of the most common measurements that you find across the country. And this is something that historically has been used by the Parks Authority for measurement of access and provision of parks in terms of acres per capita and facilities per capita. As you saw in the strategic plan, there was an addition of access distance or travel. And this is still something that is seen as very progressive across the country in terms of addressing access. But you'll see another set of 3 measurement tools here that are marked as emerging trends: and quality of facilities and the experience, the capacity of facilities, as well as value-based, or the experiences that are determined as core for all residents to have access to. And these are, again, emerging measurements, and really sets the Park Authority in Fairfax County at the forefront in determining how to provide parks and recreation provisions equitable across communities, and factoring in the differences between qualities and capacities as well. So combine the complete park score components really blend all of these elements, all 6, into a common way to measure that provision. Now, the last slide I wanted to share was some of the research that the Park Authority has done, as well as our work across the country in researching national trends and the lessons that we've learned through this process. And what you'll see is a mixture of dots here. Green represent communities that have implemented new access-based level of service measurements. And yellow dots represent communities that have advanced with even additional measurements in terms of those capacities or values, or even points allotted for different amenities. And what this is detailing is that communities are really developing measurements that respond to what is most important to them as communities. And again, this reflects the uniqueness of what is acceptable for parks and recreation within Fairfax County. Equitable access has also been one of the largest growing areas of trends within the level of service measurements across the country. But again, making sure that it addresses equitable experiences is still needed. Communities that define core experiences have residents that really make sure that they have provisions to these core experiences equitably. And then finally, value-based or point level services can accommodate a combination of these different measurements through the acreage and quality, capacity, and experience. Now, I'll hand it off for our next exercise of polling.
Well, thank you very much, Nick. We appreciate that. Very informative. And now we are going to go back to Stephanie for some polling. This is kind of neat, technology at work. Once the poll is complete, there's going to be an opportunity to discuss the results. And again, we'll explain how you can join in the conversation. So Stephanie, go ahead and start that polling.
All right, we're excited to kick off 2 questions just to solicit some of your initial feedback in real time. Our colleague Don will launch the first question. On your screen, you should see a box pop up, and you'll see our first question, which states, in general, how often do you visit parks? And we'll give everyone just a few moments to click away at your answers in real time. With these few options, you might fall into a few categories depending on the season or time of year, and try to think about how often you generally visit parks. Are you a daily user, a frequent parks user, either weekly or monthly, or every so often, every few months, or once a year, or maybe you don't visit parks, or you don't know how often you visit the park or prefer not to say. And it looks like we have quite a bit of feedback here. Looks like the group is split between very active park users, either daily or weekly, which is great to see. I think we'll just give it another moment and then we'll end the poll and launch our second one. Thank you for getting your answers so quickly. All right, we're at 50-50 between daily users and weekly users. So we have really active park users here, and we're excited to get into our next question. Then we'll have an open discussion in just a few moments. All right, so we'll launch our second question. When you think, now that we know that you're very frequent users, when you think about your visit to parks, which of the following experiences are most important to you? Please select all that apply. You don't have to select one versus the other. Is it active recreation? Are you looking to break a sweat when you go to parks? Are you looking for more contemplative, passive recreation experiences when you're relaxing or seeking quiet thinking or meditation? Or are you seeking cultural, historic recreation, enjoying nature, or is social gathering most important to you? And we'll give you a few seconds to respond. We'll check in. It looks like right now we are all seeing the results live, and it's people. It looks like everyone's seeking a variety of experiences when they go to parks. And thank you all for getting your responses in. It looks like most of our participants have responded, and it looks pretty split with really active recreation, enjoying nature, social gathering, contemplative taking the leads here, with a great representation on seeking cultural, historic recreation. Thank you all for jumping in the poll. So with this poll in mind and framework, we're going to dive into the workshop component of our presentation today.
All right, so I think that's my part again. And let's see, some people are not able to see the poll is what I read just in a note. So we might need to, the results were up for just a moment, but they aren't, there they are. So did you want to talk to the poll results, Stephanie? And then we would have folks go ahead and start to respond to it.
Yeah, thank you, Judy. We're excited. It looks like our participants today are really seeking a variety of experiences. They visit parks. So it looks like here, active recreation, contemplative, passive, enjoying nature, and social gathering really taking the lead here, with cultural, historic recreation not too far behind. So we're going to dive into this in just a few moments on more specifics about those experiences. I'll pass it back to you, Judy.
All right, so let me just, again, if you are, do we have anybody who is on the phone, Dawn, or can we just talk to the folks who are actually in the meeting?
No callers yet, Judy.
No callers yet. So if anybody, I think the number is probably out there. So we're going to go to the folks who are actually here tonight. And with the slide up, Stephanie, I'm not able to see everybody in the lineup. So if we could just maybe see, let's see. Well, let's just do this. How about if you'd like to make a comment about what challenges or barriers prevent you from enjoying Fairfax County Parks and Recreation? Are we looking just for comments for that, for folks to just pipe up?
Yep, that's right.
Okay, I'm going to scroll up and down and see who I can see, but I don't think we have so many people on board that it would be prohibitive. If you'd like to make a comment or address that question, now would be the time to go ahead. Let's see, Beverly says she cannot see the poll and cannot see the results. I'm sorry, Beverly, it could be, I'm not sure that I have and it could be, I believe, that a setting if you're on an iPad. It came up on somebody else's iPhone, so I don't know what the answer is there. I apologize. Is there anybody who has a comment on this question? Are there challenges or barriers that prevent you from enjoying Fairfax County Park Authority Parks and Recreation? Anybody like to
speak
comment?
up?
Please, Whitney.
Okay, hi, yeah, thanks. In my capacity with Friends of Homes Run, I did a summer event, kind of like a day camp for kids from the Culmore area in the Homes Run 3 trail, which is a trail south of the Barcroft Dam in Mason District. And it was astounding how the kids may have been there before, but the parents had no idea that the park was there. The trailhead is so hard to get to, so unsafe. So that's comment number one is in the Culmore area, kids and families have been using that park more, apparently, according to folks from the second story, since that event. Second comment is, but it's really hard to get at. You know, it is sort of in walking distance, but you don't even know it's there. You have to have you get lost even following GPS to get there. The second comment is that trail, if you look at a map, Lillian Carey Park is located within the same contiguous green space that is off to one side of the overall trail and the stream as it goes through the gorge. But there's no actual access. There is a social trail that goes from the main trail to get toward Lillian Carey Park. But I have this feeling, because I didn't want to go all the way through because I didn't know if it was someone's private property, but there might be houses in the way. So that was a connectivity concept that you could imagine would be not the hardest one to implement, possibly. That would help more people from that neighborhood to access that huge park. I have the last barrier I will say is that there's a problem with connectivity, and therefore it's a barrier to get between the various parts of Homes Run Trail from park to park to park, because of course that part of the county predates, the park authority predates all this kind of great planning. So if there is a way in the future to connect those green spaces, that's not only good for wildlife, but that's also great for people. Thanks.
And what would you see as the solutions? You talked about the connectivity. Is it a signage issue? Is it?
So in the case of the Homes Run 3 trailhead, it's right alongside a secondary highway. So there is a sidewalk there, but there's no wayfinding really. And the sign for the trailhead is located under the bridge. So you actually there is no address for it. You can't get to it from GPS unless you've already been there before and can drop a pin. So one option would be to find a way of adding it to the Google map and also having a trailhead sign right where the turnoff is. There's no mark for the unmarked service road. But more importantly, I think for the purpose of connectivity within a few minutes walk to the people coming from, say, the Bailey's Community Center vicinity, is to have, maybe trail markers, maybe a little bit like a bike path almost, with wayfinding to get there. Was that your question?
Yeah, we were just looking for more specifics. I think that was very informative. Thank you.
Yeah, and as far as getting from one park to another, the lake's in the way, and that's privately owned. But there might be ways on streetscapes to get people through neighborhoods to get from point A to point B. They do that in Homes Run Acres and Homes Run Woods to go from Providence Rec Center to Loria Park, but they don't do that in the areas I'm discussing, like how to get from Sleepy Hollow down to the next system of parks, that kind of thing.
Super.
Thanks.
Great feedback. We really appreciate that. Who else has some ideas, some comments, anything that you perceive as barriers to your enjoyment of our parks?
Hi, Judy. Fairfax NAACP did a summer event over in the Route 1 area in Mount Vernon Woods Park, which I realize that park is up to be redone anyway. But something that I have noticed as a recurring theme is there was no toileting facilities at all, which really puts a barrier if a family wants to do something, if there needs to be like a social event, bringing people together. We had to go rent a porta-john and place it and hope it hadn't rained and flooded because it's a lower lying area. So that was a barrier, as well as there was a pavilion there which had a nice little, almost like a bar area, but there were no picnic tables there, which kind of I can't imagine having like a family birthday party or something like that with no like under there, and then not having a place to sit and eat with my family. And then also I know for that area, just from talking to the communities that surround it, they consider that park unsafe. So even if there were picnic tables and restrooms, the safety is a really big barrier, probably even a year out from planning the event. The first feedback I heard was no one really does anything in that park because it's unsafe. It's a, hit or miss whether there is homeless population living there, which is, that's a thing all on its own. But the perception, even at the daytime, was concern for safety.
So let me stop you there and tell you that I think we agree probably with every single thing you said, which is why we're talking about Mount Vernon Woods, right?
Yeah.
And that is why we are taking action in that park. And I know there are some planners online who could probably speak a little bit more eloquently to what we are doing, or perhaps Brendan or.
Judy, I'd be happy to.
Sure, that would be great.
Yeah, thank you, Lydia. That's excellent feedback. Mount Vernon Woods is a good example. We are not remaster planning that park, but we are taking the master plan and we're bringing it into concept design right now. We're just about past that process. We heard from the citizens and they said the same things that you said to us as well, that we had a good turnout for our last meeting. So a number of things that we're going to do. We are going to put restrooms there. We're going to put a skate park in, one of the things that we found that that does tamp down crime is more people using your park. So a skate park, a large playground, a shelter with picnic tables up front, and all those things will be at the front of the park so that they're much closer to the road for police patrols. That's an easier thing for the officers to check the park out on a regular basis. We are going to utilize the lighting that's along the road as well to light up those facilities. So we think we've got a good plan there, but we did hear folks from the community talk about safety, talk about the fact that just, you do need restrooms, and that's something that you'll see in a lot of our parks going forward. Folks are staying in our parks longer than they were before, and we really do need to provide sanitary facilities as much as possible. So we think we've got a good plan there. We are going through, as soon as this public comment period is over, which is technically over now, we're just reviewing comments. We'll get started on design, and so hopefully within a year plus we'll be on the ground with that new park concept. So, but thank you for your comments. It's and that's not the only place we face that in. So that's some of those comments are almost across the board for these smaller parks. So that's great to hear. Thank you.
Yeah, I will. That's wonderful to hear, and you are definitely correct. I think the bathroom and or any type of sanitary facilities and safety and even just picnic tables is I mean, I've seen it. I'm fortunate enough to be in the Drainsville district where there is lots and lots of parkland, but even some of the smaller parks, don't have access to those things. So I appreciate you taking the lead on that.
Anything else, Lydia?
No, ma'am.
All right, thank you. Great comments. As Brendan said, that one is in process, and we've had a great response from the community, and we're very anxious to keep it going and to get some things in there to make that park really come to life in a safe way for that community.
And
thank you. Who else?
Judy, could I go back to Whitney on the
Sure.
Holmes Run Trail and the markings quickly?
Yes, please.
Thank you. Yeah, we obviously agree with you on that as well. COVID has brought a lot of folks into parks and into trails that hadn't necessarily used them in the past. So we have a whole new audience of folks that that are not, used to necessarily walking on our trail system. And one of the things that we have a signage committee right now that is, we're actually meeting, I think, within the next week to try to finalize some of these signs, and mile markers are something we'll certainly be talking about. And also You Are There signs that let folks know how long this trail is and how long it's going to take them to get through this trail, so folks can judge for themselves if they should make that loop or make that trail connection. So we appreciate that comment as well, and that's something that we are working on.
Thanks, Brendan. Who else would like to share challenges or barriers that prevent them from enjoying Fairfax County Park recreations?
This is Beverly Dickerson. There's another area down in Laurel Hill that could be addressed. At the Laurel Hill Equestrian Center, it's used not only by equestrians, but a lot of mountain bikers and families apparently walk through there. There's a connector over to the workhouse, an old road that goes over to the workhouse. There are no portable toilets there. They would be very much appreciated because it does get enough use for them. There's no kiosk with a map that shows people what the area is like or where the trails are, where they can go. There's also inadequate parking, which is primarily a concern for equestrian events because the parking design is totally inadequate for the number of people that would like to come any single time. So that's another area that we are working with, trying to get that improved.
Thank you, Beverly. I appreciate it. It's good to see you. And Beverly is the person who knows so much about all the equestrian areas in the county. She has been an activist in that area as long as I've been here. So thank you for your good work. Appreciate it. It's nice to see you. Let me go up to the chat. We do have some comments in there that I'd like to read. Alexis Glenn to everybody says, I'm surprised that capacity of facility is an emerging trend. That looks like data that you are already looking at, but in a slightly different way to frame it. Anybody want to comment on that? Perhaps Nick, this was in regards to your part of the presentation, capacity of facility. Stephanie, perhaps I can get you to respond to that, or Sam.
Yeah, Stephanie here. Yeah, thank you for the feedback. And I'll also add too in the chat, there's quite a bit of feedback on fair weather crossings as a barrier and challenge. And also I say the street network, but that's also to include sidewalks and bike access. I'm just catching up here, but these are barriers that we're definitely looking at and looking to see how we can improve that walk and other types of transportation access and drive access. And thank you everyone for your feedback.
So Alexis also writes, the sidewalks to my nearest rec center, Lee, are on one side of the road and it switches sides, so I have to cross Telegraph Road. I could bike to Huntley Meadows. It is less than 3 miles from my home, but there are not sidewalks or bike lanes on Lockheed to get there. Harrison has sidewalks and one bike lane that both end before I get to the park. Okay, so we have so noted it. I'm reading it so that it does get into our recording. And then Whitney also talked about the harder problem to solve in Holmes Run 3, perhaps, is that there are 4 fair weather crossings as opposed to a bike pedestrian crossing. That's hard to solve because you don't want to destroy the park, to drop bridges into it, and it is a gorge. There is a sewer line there, etc. That said, I have photos of teens carrying bikes across the stepping stones, and have also been on the path when people in their 50s and older who are uncomfortable with their balance. Likewise, there's no way for a stroller or wheelchair to get across the 4 stream crossings. There is also a park that is only available when it is good weather. Barcraft Dam is pass-through dam, so it gets a ton of water that rushes through there and is unsafe to cross in heavy storms. if any of the staff would like to respond to, I know Fairweather Crossings come up with some regularity. There are some people who love them and others who don't. Would anybody like to comment on any of the comments that I've read so far from staff?
Hi, this is Stephanie again. Yeah, we're definitely looking at the network that includes Fairweather crossings and also sidewalks within communities and on streets and having bike lanes.
Okay, and Whitney also writes, I would love if there was a mile marker system along Holmes Run 3 trail that would connect with the city of Alexandria's existing mile markers, and make signage in Spanish too. That is a very good point. The most recent meeting that we had in public meeting in the park we were talking about earlier, Mount Vernon Woods, we did have a language assets there. And I have to say, it was the first time that I ever got a question on a card that I had to ask for translation because it was in Spanish. And so I think that's wonderful. I think that we are engaging in new ways, whether it's online, whether it's in person. We do now have language asset access dollars to use. And so hopefully we will be doing a much better job in terms of making language a non-issue in terms of barriers to finding out about park meetings and to participating in park meetings. Public input, which is our engagement tool, which the county has just authorized for everybody. It does have the ability to translate on the spot. So there's a lot of progress there. It's noted about the signage too. And I think anybody from planning or would like to comment on signs in Spanish or other languages?
We can certainly, I'm sure that's being discussed at our side committee, but I'll make sure that that's being addressed. That's a pretty simple thing that we should be doing. Now, there are a lot of different languages in Fairfax County, so that could be a barrier for us as well.
Okay. Jim Klein, Jim, I know you have some comments in the chat. Would you like to speak to us? I know I saw you on in the meeting, or I'll be glad to read those comments.
Sure. I'm Jim Klein. I'm on the Fairfax County Trails, Bikeways, and Sidewalk Committee. And one of the challenges is in any connectivity to get to a park is there's no, you either have to do it in the road or do it in stormwater easements. Not much choice. But one of the big problems that we've run across is that in stormwater easements or project areas where there was a trail, and when work is done in those easements, they don't put the trail back. And they don't put a paved trail back, but they don't recognize a natural surface trail during that whole process. So I'm wondering if there's something in this planning effort that could change that. It's kind of a specific request, I guess, but it's a huge barrier because that's really the only way you can get to and from some parks, especially the lesser developed ones.
Thank you.
Jim, this is Brendan. That is an issue. You mentioned increased rainfall. Our trail systems and our bridges are getting beat up everywhere. So that's an issue. That's also an issue when we look at land development services and how we permit our trails. That's one of the reasons why pavement's been something that we've stressed over the years. It's also maintainability. So, but that is something we're talking with our folks across the street about. I don't know what the resolution is going to be, but it is something that if we could go back with some natural surface trails and repair what's missing, that would be come with additional maintenance, but it would probably be in the long run an easier way to handle some of these trails, especially stream valley trails.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Brandon. I'm sorry, go ahead.
This is Barry. I'd like to make a comment also about natural surface versus paved. There are many places where the natural surface trails are much more appropriate to the environment and the situation, particularly up in the northern part, say, of the Cross County Trail. And the local people do not want paved trails. The natural surface may be more maintenance, but that's what is needed for the particular group of users on those trails. I just wanted to throw that comment in.
Well, thank you. That's yeah, that's something we're working with. So hopefully we'll keep everybody posted.
And that's a natural tension that I think we've had between those who want natural and paved for as long as I can remember. It's also a funding issue. We get where we get some of our dollars and how they can be used, and an ADA accessibility issue. Stephanie, I think you want to move to the next question.
Yes, we're excited to also touch on our second poll from the poll just a little bit ago, but to really open up the conversation to ask, what experiences would you like to see more at FCPA parks? What are those experiences? If it's active recreation, if it's more passive spaces, if it's more natural historical recreation, or nature-based natural experiences that you're looking for. We'd love to hear from you in terms of what experiences you're looking for, or facilities that you think we should be including more in our parks.
There, we've thrown down the next question. Who'd like to comment or has an idea to share? This is, you're getting it on the record as far as making the ask. So if ever there was a good time to share with us, this is it. What experiences would you like to see more of at Fairfax County Parks?
I would like to see more of an investment in history and cultural experiences at the parks. I think a lot of our parks and areas in Fairfax County have a rich history, and that can definitely be something that would make it more engaging for the surrounding community. Yes.
Good thought. Good thought. And I know in small ways we've started to mine the stories of parks and to bring people in around those stories. It's in its infancy, but I think those, where did the land come from? Who used to live there? Why was it important? Those are the questions that we're starting to get familiar with, and I think you make a very good point. Who else would like to comment on what experiences would you like to see in the parks? What's missing? Anybody?
Sorry, I put a comment in the chat, but I would love to just expound for a second.
Sure.
Before COVID, Friends of Homes Run was working with I think it was an AP human geography teacher at Falls Church High School, trying to get off the ground this idea of, okay, so we have the Stream Valley Park right next door, which is around Providence Rec Center. And there's a history there. You can see clues in the area there of just how climate is changing. So there's an environmental interesting aspect to it. And it's also an area that has seen lots of change over years due to, the civic decisions made. And it would be just like perfect ground for kids who just like traipse through the park and don't give it a second thought, to have kind of like, I don't know, a civics lesson, an environmental lesson, to think like, citizens have to think about the land use, park use, et cetera. And it would be great if there was a curriculum developed, because it's certainly not just Falls Church High School. Justice High School is the same relationship with a park next door, et cetera. So, I mean, it's just that kind of like broadening the thought of, because this is the generation that's going to have to deal with climate change, and this is the generation that's going to have less access to the same kind of wilds that you and I may have grown up with. It just is a no-brainer to me. So anyway, just thought I'd throw that out there.
Thank you. Terrific input. Let me go back to the chat for just a moment, and if anybody else wants to voice their opinion, we'll have time for that too. More bike parking, more trails, more parks in less traditional areas. For example, reclaiming portions of parking lots for parks, expanding tree space along roadways. Those are all good thoughts. Thank you, Alexis. Who else has a thought? What else would you like to see in the parks?
I have a comment.
Please.
I'd like to see Fairfax County being leaders in environmental stewardship of the parks more. I think we're a generation, and the young generation too, are people who are very concerned about the environment. And I would like to see more, like for instance, Mount Vernon Woods Park. I mean, I think there's a lot of promises I heard given, but I think the first thing is to be a good steward of the land. And I think that land has been very neglected. And the maintenance, my husband and I pick up there, and if we didn't, the trash would be built up there. And I just think that there's a lot of promises, but I don't know if those promises will all be maintained. And I think the first thing people want is this good stewardship of the land, a good stormwater system there. And a lot of people want a path into Huntley Meadow Park, and a lot of Huntley Meadow Park is because of the environment, the connection to nature, not as much as the recreation. So I do have a great concern, and I'd just like to see Fairfax County being leaders in being good stewards, not just getting more land, checking off a skateboard, checking off a baseball park, but checking off first that they're the great stewards of the land that they acquire.
I think that's a valid point. We have almost 24,000 acres of land. It is a challenge for us to even know from an environmental perspective what it is that's out there. And that is one of the things that our resource management folks and natural resource branch is working on. And clearly we are underfunded for caring for that land as opposed to just owning it. So you raise an issue that we are aware of and working towards more funding in order to be able to take care of those issues. Good input. Thank you. We appreciate that. Any other thoughts on what you would like to see more of at county parks?
Yeah, I'll speak to one other issue about kind of similar to the last comment, but about casual use, just unorganized sports or unorganized activities. There ought to just be designated on a master plan places that are always going to be grass and trees or natural areas, and they should have a designation in and of itself rather than just the leftover land. So I would really like to see that kind of get more play in the new plans that come up.
Just open spaces where people can do as they recreate as they choose, right?
We're unorganized.
Unorganized.
Sometimes people have called those kind of casual use areas, or just, they might have tables and benches and paths and things around the edge, but it's just I guess the biggest casual use area is the sheep meadow at Central Park. So but you don't have to go that big, but
I
but
get
that's
it.
an example.
All right. Thank you. We appreciate that input. Anybody else who'd like to say, this is what we need more of in the parks, and this is my idea? Okay. Well, we're going to have more conversations with other people and be asking that same questions. Let me see. I think there's a couple of more ideas in the chat. Let me quickly, let's see. I would like to see more places in the thousands of acres to get something to eat and drink. That's from Howard Albers. Interesting. Who knows what the possibilities are? Agree with Jim's comment from Whitney, thinking of Justice Park as the last flat green space, and it's just not that big for, say, pickup games, other than AstroTurf at Mason District and Knollwood. Okay. I'm taking that as AstroTurf not being such a great thing. I guess it is if you are playing on the soccer field and you want to play after it rains. It's not about the experience per se, but totally agree with the need for more maintenance. I spent Sunday with another volunteer cleaning up the parking lot at Roundtree, 3 bags. Yes, that is a continuing issue for us, not only at that park, but all over to be able to maintain the parks that we have. Often people come on the weekends when our use is at such enormous a peak, and then it takes us a while to clean up after that kind of usage. So maintenance, taking care of those things we own is a resounding theme that we hear time and time again. All right. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak to more that we haven't heard from yet? More this, more that? All right, Stephanie, where do we go from here?
Great. From here, we go on to more ways to on Q&A and then more ways to engage.
All right. So, well, usually we're a little bit more focused in this, but we're gonna play dangerously tonight and let you ask any questions that you might have. That's always frightening because you never know what's gonna come up. But this is a good group, I can tell. Are there any questions this evening on the PROSA project, or any questions at all that we might be able to address?
You're having more of these meetings, right? So if others did not come, I can put it in my email to people to go.
Absolutely, we absolutely are. And if you look in the chat, boy, I tell you, they're good in the chat. Thank you, whoever's doing the chat, Robert. There will be another community workshop Tuesday, November 1st. It's going to be on Zoom at 6:30, and we would appreciate it very much if you would help spread the word and tell, family, friends, neighbors, whatever your network is. So here's a question: what does funding of recommendations that come out of this program look like? I could tap into Amy. She's deputy director, really put her on the spot, or maybe Brendan. We have any money to do any of the things we're talking about?
Well, as that, Judy, and Alexa, as I mentioned earlier, this part of this process is going to be a look at our park system that is going to steer us towards our capital project plan. That's where we put our funds, typically bond funds and other county funds towards, we're focused very heavily right now on maintaining what we have. To Jim's point, our trails specifically. Yeah, this process will inform our next iteration of our capital improvement plan, which is how funding gets into our park system. So it'll be very heavily influenced by this process.
Maybe I could just add that our park board has been very active in terms of speaking with the Board of Supervisors, letting them know that we're experiencing an aging park system, and that the funding that we have in park bonds and such only goes so far, and asking them to look at things through the equity lens in terms of fairness across the county, and our executive director the same. So certainly that's a focus, like I really haven't seen it before, and I think that bodes well. I think that officials are taking a new look. Most of our arguments, so to speak, for that are based on data that we're collecting and comments from the community, and just this kind of work, so that we're not just saying we want it, we're saying the community needs it. And that's an important difference in terms of being able to secure funding in the future. Who else has a comment or a question? Here's one from Lydia. How will FCPA decide how to prioritize these initiatives?
Judy, I can jump in on that. That would be basically our park board would look at these recommendations as well as the needs across the system and start to prioritize. We try also to look for a variety of funding sources and alternative funding. So we will come to our park board with those recommendations as well.
I believe that there was a question earlier about needing more parking for bikes. And I think that we've recently installed between 60 and 80, if I have that correct. And that there's another couple of dozen that are coming due to another grant. I think I've got that correct.
Yes, and I think that feeds into the question. I mean, that's from Environmental Improvement Program grant. So we are always looking to partner with other agencies and entities within the county to work together to achieve what we hope to be a better park system. So.
Right. And, park bonds, I think we've done 13 to date, and they have always been successful, and we depend on the support of the community to get those passed. But I think Amy's point is that we look under every possible funding source, And whether it's what they call the sinking fund, or it's environmental money, or it's grants from outside, whatever that option is, those are things that we are considering in order to assist with, with gaining the funding that we need to do these things. Let's see. I think we also, Jim Klein had a question or a comment in the chat. Will you be able to reach out to schools and get more young people involved with the planning effort, maybe through schools that are right near parks, such as High Bluff Valley Elementary, right next to Huntley Meadows? Pick a few and give it a try. Stephanie?
Yeah, we'll be delighted to give that a go. Thank you so much for the suggestion, Jim. We'll definitely reach out to those schools and also to the PTAs. I'm sure we'll be able to get in touch with them. Thank you for the idea.
There was another comment, which I think is very interesting, that some of the ideas that we're talking about tonight are more about programming than necessarily about capital projects. And so how do we address the funding for those?
I think we have a grants team that's put together with all the divisions within the Park Authority, and we look for opportunities to even develop new programming ideas and go after those grants. So that's another possibility. Also looking at our programming that we have right now to see if it's in line with some of the recommendations. That'll be all the recommendations coming out with this PROSA strategy, and we'll have to realign some of those as well.
All right, let's see if there's, let's see, Whitney also said she loved Jim's idea. The city of Baltimore did that in a low-income neighborhood, and that promoted local buy-in. And that was the comment about schools participating in the planning and in these kind of discussions to get great ideas. Okay.
Sorry, to clarify, not so much the school as kids, it's teenagers, and they even paid them with a stipend. And then, just to get them the buy-in and all the commitment. And through that, the kids also learned about urban planning and architecture and whatever. And there were lots of insights that they had based on, for example, you don't really want trees there because then your sight line's not good for safety, things that park planners may not have thought about,
Thank you for clarifying that. Appreciate it. All right. Any other questions? Well, this is really, they've done some work, but this is a great start. And I want to tell you how much we appreciate it. Let me see if there's a couple more. Thank you for including the A in your park, recreation, open space, and access plan. Fantastic. Thank you, Jim. We appreciate that. As I said, this is really a beginning of a process. It's going to hopefully mine some great material. Unless there are any other questions, let's go ahead and go to our last slide. And that is that, so the survey is going to be released on the project webpage this week. We actually have an information release going out the door, I believe, tomorrow to entice more people. And for those who think that they're nifty and great, as opposed to some of us over 60, there's a QR code that you can use, or you can just put in the bit.ly that is there. I'm just teasing. You can sign up for project updates on the project webpage, scan the code, or go to the page. And questions, ideas, or comments, just go ahead and send an email to prosa@publicinput.com. And I always say the fallback is, if you can't remember that one, you can always say parkmail@fairfaxcounty.gov/parks, which is our general mailbox, and we'll be glad to go ahead and send that. I just wanted to share just a comment that I think is apropos for tonight. An activist, Margaret Mead, noted, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. And I think that tonight is such a great example. Your input is incredibly valuable to us, and we really, really appreciate your participation. So Stephanie, is there anything else that we need to add before we say goodnight?
No, that's everything. We're really excited about everyone's feedback. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedules to be here today and also to spread the word. Robert added in the chat where to go to find the project website. We'll have the, as Judy mentioned, the survey available tomorrow. We'll have this be updated on the webpage of the recording. And thank you very much. So thank you.
So good night. Be well. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good
Thank
good
you.
meeting. Good meeting.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.